Okay, so last time I kind of got stopped there for a second. So last time we were talking about how the people who could evacuate were allowed to evacuate, and they had the money to do such. But a lot of people who couldn't evacuate often were the poor, which were mostly minority groups that were stuck there in the city, and the city and the state did not provide them the actual aid that they needed. So they didn't give them buses and things like that to actually get them out. So in a sense, this is a type of what we call environmental injustice, where those who could afford and those who actually could leave, who were usually the majority there, left. And the ones who were left behind were the minorities in these low-income kind of areas. They were left behind, and a lot of them had a lot more deaths associated with it, a lot more destruction because of that. So a great example of environmental justice. Another one, here's an example of what we call Outged Gardens. This is actually a housing community in Chicago. And basically what's happened here, there was an abandoned landfill that they re-innovated. They kind of reclaimed and kind of fixed up a little bit and actually built housing on it. And the housing was specifically for African American World War II veterans. The problem with this is this area was surrounded by toxic facilities. There was already on an old landfill that was reclaimed, and it was often known as what we call the toxic donut because of all the stuff that was around it, all these landfills and toxic facilities that were around it. It caused a lot of water contamination and other things that these individuals were getting their water from. So within 90% of its population, which was African American, most of them were below the poverty level. And it's another classic example of environmental racism, where in that area, medical records have indicated there was higher rates of brain tumors and other problems because of where they lived. And so those individuals did not have the same rights to their environment than others do who had the money and who had to live in these areas. So this is a great image here. If you have the money, you can live up on the top, have the nice clean water, and then the people on the bottom get their byproducts, right? And that's true in a lot of ways, and it's sad, but it's true. Okay, here's one more that I wanted to talk about. This one actually hits home, and the reason is because this is a local issue that's happening right now. Right now, there is a pipeline that's being proposed that goes all the way up from West Virginia all the way down to Pembroke, and Pembroke is where it ends. And we'll talk about this. This is a natural gas pipeline, and it crosses multiple states to deliver natural gas to power plants and other facilities around the South. And so this is going to have a lot of jobs coming to the area, some direct jobs, and be temporary, but it still be a lot of money to the surrounding communities and also to the companies who are doing this as well. And that's what most people are upset about, is that Dominion Energy and Duke Energy are going to be getting a lot of the money from this. Right now, the engineering is done, the permitting has been done. They're still trying to figure out getting the private funding associated with it and final approval, but it's still in the works. Now, this pipeline, like I said, starts all the way up in West Virginia and comes down through North Carolina. And there's going to be a spur that goes out to Chesapeake, that area here, and the rest of it's going to go down and end right here in Robeson County. So if you go down Prospect Road and go north on Prospect Road, you'll get to that intersection between Prospect Road and 7-Eleven. And right there by that intersection, there's these transfer stations. They're pumping stations, right? You can see the Prospect water tower in the background of one of those pictures. See right there. And these are the pumping stations. This is where the pipeline is going to go. It's going to go to this site right here and then be transmitted from there. We already have pipelines here, natural gas pipelines that go right through Pembroke. But what they're worried about is pipelines have a tendency sometimes to actually leak. They're much better than actually trucking it or doing anything else. So it's actually a really good technique to pipeline it. It's much safer than any other way. So if we want our power, we probably want a pipeline. But the problem is a lot of people have is that they're taking the pipeline through areas that are low poverty, areas of places that have high poverty rates and also high amounts of minorities. And what's problematic with this, sorry, I can't talk today, is that a lot of these individuals who, because it's going through these rural neighborhoods, don't really have a say in the matter. Whereas if it went through a more affluent neighborhood or through a city, there would be a lot more fight. There's a lot of people fighting it. The people who have money who could actually fight the companies, whereas people who are living in these regions are below the poverty line often, and therefore they don't fight the problem. Now, if the natural gas were to actually explode, or if there was a leak or something like that, it would actually also impact the rural communities more than it would the non-rural communities. And so this is a tentative example of environmental justice issue. Okay, and so I want to bring these up because these water issues, these environmental issues, do impact people, and they tend to impact the more vulnerable individuals. So those who do not have the resources to actually help themselves, and people below the poverty line are often within that group. And individuals with minority are also often below the poverty line. Okay, and we're just doing based off of statistical analyses and stuff like that. And so it's sad to say that these kind of projects are being put in place, but I understand the reason why the company's doing it, because it's going to be cheaper for them, right? It's going to give the resource so that everybody can have power, but they're trying to do it where they can basically have the pipeline in the safest. It's going to hit the least amount of people. If you put it straight through town, it's going to hit more people, have more potential risk. So they put it in the rural communities. Well, the rural communities then actually have more increase in poverty and stuff like that. So it's a double-edged sword in a sense. Anyways, the point comes is that's something that I wanted to talk about. So what do you think about these statements? 1.2 billion people lack access to clean water in the world. A lot of people don't have clean water. And more than 2.5 times more people lack adequate potable water, that's drinking water, than live in the United States. So the vast majority of the world does not have good drinking water. Okay? 2.4 billion people live without decent sanitation. And that means about 4 billion without wastewater disposal. So that suggests we have about 7 billion people on our planet right now. And almost more than half of them do not have proper wastewater disposal. Okay? You're very blessed. I don't know if you understand that. No matter where you are and what circumstances you are in, even just coming to this university tells me that you have proper sanitation. Probably. Most likely you have proper sanitation. And even those who here that might be the poorest of the poor amongst us still probably has better conditions than 3/4 of the world. All right? And sometimes we don't realize that. So the question is that's also an environmental justice issue. Just because we were born in the U.S., does that mean we have more of a right to clean water than those who live in sub-Saharan Africa? Because people, if you look at it, 12 million people die every year from lack of water, and including 3 million from waterborne diseases. And the number one disease that people actually die from is diarrhea. I don't know if people understand that, but diarrhea can be deadly. If people can't get enough water into them, and it just comes out the other end, that means they're going to actually basically die because of the lack of water. Okay, they're going to be dehydrated. And so that is, more people die from water and sanitation issues every single year than ever dies from guns. Ever dies from guns every single year. And so this is an important issue. It's an important issue that we all need to be made aware of and understand that you guys actually have it well, and be thankful that you have how well you do have it. The average American person actually takes a shower for about 10-15 minutes, which is by far, and in that 10 to 15 minute time, you use probably about about 100 gallons or 80 gallons, I can't remember the number, but much more than the average person does in a day. In just one shower, you use more than the average African. An average African uses about 5 gallons of water per day. An average U.S. citizen, 552 gallons of water per day. Okay, we have a huge difference between the way that the vast majority of the world works versus us. Okay, so when you ever talk about the have and the have-nots, you're most likely a have in relationship to the world. You might not be a have in relationship to some of the people within the U.S. I don't have near as much money as some of the people around this area do sometimes. But when it comes to environmental issues, I am very lucky. And so that's something to just kind of think about. Okay? These are the countries that have freshwater stress. This is the countries that had freshwater stress back in 1995. This is what they're suggesting in 2025. And yes, the United States is going to get to that point where about 40 to 20% of our country is going to be underneath water stress. And that's the case, and especially in the western United States. We have a lot more issues with water in the western United States than you do in the eastern United States. I used to work for a water consultant company, and we had $1 million suits going back and forth between people because they were using their water. And therefore they didn't have enough water for their farms, for their dairies, and things like that. And therefore they were losing money. And so people were very frustrated with that because we didn't have enough water. In the eastern United States, we have more of a water quality issue than we do a water quantity issue. Okay, which means that we have more contamination in the eastern United States than we do in the western United States. But we have a lot more water in the eastern United States than we do in the western. So that's a big problem. Other places in the world, yes, especially the desert environments, notice right around the 40-degree mark, which is our desert regions, and are going to be stressed with water. It's also areas that have high populations as well. So how much water do you use on a day? The average family that uses water here, okay, how much water they use on a daily basis. They usually use about 400 gallons for what we call direct use. And then we have about, let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that'd be 600, about 1,200 gallons indirect use. They need water for power. So when you use power, you're also using water. So realize that. When somebody made your shirt or made your hamburger that you bought at the store or anything like that, they used water. And that's an indirect use. So every single one of us, when we buy a product, have a direct use. Like when we're drinking water or cooking with it or anything like that, or flushing our toilets, that's a direct use. Indirect use is all the products that we have around us that you still use water to produce those products. So your power, your clothing, your tables, all that stuff that was used to use water to produce those objects. Okay. So on average, we use about quite a few, about 400 in a daily family for direct use and about 1,200 indirect for a family. That's a lot of water in relationship to that. When you look back at the African, it only uses 5 gallons in one day. That's for both indirect and direct for the most part. So how much water do we use? This is how much I use. I went and calculated it myself for my house, and how much I use for the outdoor, especially during the summertime is when I did this. I do a lot of water for irrigation of my property, right? Indoor water and so forth. Well, this is the water use for the inside and the percentages of what I use for the inside water. So most of my water is from faucets, toilets, showers, and so forth. Everybody tends to have leaks. It's almost a given. And about 14% of our water is from leaks. If we can fix those leaks, it can go down and down from there. So anyway, so you have your, this is estimated water use for that I did. And you can do this, there's a link on this one. You can link on it and try to figure out your own water use if you want. You're going to do that actually in your discussion page this week, as is to actually look at that water use calculator and to figure out how much water you use on a daily basis. Okay, so when you use water, what you should do is really think about what we call the 3 R's. It's the same way when we do garbage or waste. We want to reduce the amount of waste we have, we want to reuse as much as we can, and recycle it. Well, we can do the same thing with water. So when we reduce, just try to have low flow fixtures, native drought tolerant landscaping. We could reuse, which means, for example, I have rain gutters in my house that go down to a gallon to a barrel drum, and I reuse that water to actually This is called what we call gray water. We use it for my plants outside. Okay, or we can actually do reclaimed water, which is water that we shower with that we can use for a different purpose or something like that. Okay, so